What if you could play games online? Not like that. I mean, like, it's not being played on your computer. It's essentially live streaming a game being played on a more powerful computer onto your computer, meaning the limits of what can be played on your hardware are no longer limits. Everybody remembers the first console they got growing up. But the fact that the game is running on the console means that whatever's on the console is the limit of what can be played. Seems pretty obvious, right? Like almost an immutable fact. What if it wasn't? You can play Gears of War on your iPad. You can play Gears of War on your microwave, dude. You can do whatever you want. This is a new world, baby. And if you think that's a cool idea, you wouldn't be alone. In fact, you're exactly the person various companies have been looking for. Google tried that with Stadia. A little company called Gaikai tried it. And lastly, firstly, a company called OnLive tried it. In short, it was a company that, at one point, to many people, held a lot of promise. To quote Sean Hollister writing for The Verge, "Make no mistake, OnLive was the future." Was, huh? You know, even now knowing these various ventures didn't really work out, like, it would be so cool if it did. You'd be able to open up, like, such a vast array of opportunities here for what games could look like. Everybody's complacent in their ideas and their limitations of what a service could look like. They aren't looking towards what could be done if you think outside the box a little bit. Such was the case with OnLive, the very first company that tried anything like this. And the story of OnLive is deep. It's a story of ego, a story of unbridled hype, and lastly, abject despair. But who cares? Why? Well, to answer that question, we're gonna go right to the whiteboard. Not just any whiteboard, a very particular whiteboard in the offices of the company Web TV, where a very particular man, Steve Perlman, is furiously scrawling notes. And also, it's the year of our Lord, 1999. Y2K, baby. Okay, so what the hell? I was just talking about OnLive. What's Web TV? Who is this guy? Well, Web TV is crucial to the story of OnLive, to the story of Steve Perlman, who OnLive, for better or for worse, mostly for worse, is inextricably tied to. Web TV, when it first came out in the 90s, was just absolutely fucking insane. Like, people went crazy for this thing. It had one product, and that product was known as a thin client. Basically, it's a low performance little, like, brick of a device that connected to your TV and actually let you use it as a computer through the internet alone. And this was at a time when a lot of people didn't have a PC, and if they did, it was like weak as hell. So to just be able to use basically someone else's computer and then just stream it through your TV was like really cool for like a lot of people, and it's not hard to understand why. And like, let's think about that for a second, okay? You're in 1999. Think dial-up. Think getting on mom's computer to play Roller Coaster Tycoon. Saving up an entire summer's earnings from working at like the pre-9/11 factory. I don't know. You're working at some like gas station job to buy a mid-tier computer of your own if you're even old enough to work. And then fucking out of the blue, onto the market from nowhere came a device that you don't have to worry about RAM or CPU. You don't have to learn any of that stuff. You just put this thing on your TV and wow, hey presto, somebody else is handling the computer. Like in some server farm, like somewhere else. You don't even need to know what a server farm is. You just have it. What? Like, that's crazy, man. And Steve Perlman, like, let's be clear, this is no Elon Musk, okay? In 1976, he built his first computer, which most people were not doing even if they were like techie in 1976. He built more things, more computers, graphics, video systems, modems, displays, audio systems, interface devices, video games, software, and made even more stuff, including and I'm just gonna say this out loud, and I don't really know what it means, but a massively parallel 3D animation chip. All right, man. Remember QuickTime? That stuff you needed to play a video at all on your computer in like the 2000s. Yeah, he basically made that. He was involved in the distribution of it and everything, but he also like very directly had a hand in it. So yeah, this guy like makes stuff basically. And more than that, ever the forward-looking guy, he made some weirdly prescient predictions regarding like the general direction of how people will interface with television in the future. He was quoted as saying, "The broadcast TV experience as we know it today will be viewed as an anachronism of the 20th century. Within a decade, almost all TV programming, essentially everything except for live events, will be available on demand and combined with interactive content. All channels will be virtual, and just like with the web, you'll have access to what you want, when you want it. Prime time as we know it will cease to exist." This is at a time when people were saying the internet itself will still just be like a fad. He's saying, hey, one day Netflix will exist. Like, if anything, he wasn't bold enough to fully capture the future in that, like, even live events will be streamed. But yeah, like, by and large, pretty on the fucking money. Web TV obviously was like a huge success. It was sold to Microsoft in 1997, but he continued to work there, albeit with $500 million more from Billy G due to the acquisition. So bear in mind, that whole whiteboard scene I was describing earlier, that was sponsored by Microsoft, which then rebranded Web TV actually to MSN TV. Steve Pearlman, he was restless. He started getting bored with the idea and started moving on to something else. More than that, he had $500 million. He was just sitting on it. It was just burning a hole through his pocket. Web TV was no longer the object of his attention. It's time for a magnum opus. In the years between leaving Web TV and the foundation of OnLive, he founded this company, Reardon Steel, which was essentially a base for other companies to start developing their own shit. Really just a way for him to maintain his own wealth and like connections within the industry. I don't know why it's called Reardon Steel. I guess like because it's strong like steel or something? I don't really know. It had nothing to do with steel manufacturing, which is probably why it was eventually renamed to just Reardon. Another thing he did during this period, this is a little funny, he did the effects for the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. You know, the Brad Pitt movie where he ages in reverse? It got him a lot of praise. Even this, though, was not his end goal. Enter into the primordial mind of Steve Pearlman, the mind of a maverick, a pioneer, a builder of bridges between audiences, and a maker of money. Deep inside where the flame of computer but on your TV once raged, in the now dimly lit, stagnant forge of his mind, a spark was struck. But only a spark. It would take years, of course, years to gather the capital, to gather resources and, well, to find an office, a workforce, to make what? Well, another little box to attach to a screen that also streams stuff. What if Web TV, but video games? The words formed in his mind. OnLive. And yeah, that's where we are. It's about 2009 at this point. So how did it work? Well, the principle was indeed similar to Web TV. You get a little brick of a device, it connects to a monitor or TV or whatever, and that thing will broadcast a game being played on a remote console that is being run by the company of OnLive. And just like how Web TV was seen as an outright technological revolution in the 90s, OnLive was seen as an equivalent breakthrough when it was announced at GDC in 2009, or the Game Developers Conference. Hype was off the charts for this thing. During GDC, OnLive was trending on Google more than video games itself, like the term video games. 100,000 people signed up for the closed beta. Investors, they started lining up, obviously. Developers wanted a piece of it. You had to imagine console developers were looking at this and starting to sweat. The mindset of the industry in 2009 in particular was, here we go. Here's the time for the real revolutions to start. Like, goddamn, they were working on like the Kinect at this point. Like, ideas were overflowing, really. Yeah, the ground was more than ripe for something like OnLive that would just disrupt the entire industry, to take root. Like, think about this from the consumer end of things. You have to buy a new console every few years to keep up with new games that are coming out. If it's a PC, it's the same thing, except it's more granular. You upgrade your graphics card, whatever. You buy an OnLive, they're gonna upgrade their stuff on the back end as new games are coming out. So you no longer have to worry about upgrading your hardware ever again because of like the framework of the whole thing. It's crazy. So that's why people were saying this is the future. It seemed like it was on par with the shift to like 3D graphics even. It seemed like it was really gonna shake things up. I mean, I remember being a kid and hearing about this stuff and being like, whoa, I don't even need like an epic computer anymore. I could just stream a game that I can't run using OnLive, and I can have new gaming experiences I never dreamed of. There was this meme of like, can it run Crysis? Because the game Crysis was viewed as like the most graphically intense game of the period, and a lot of people were hyped because you could play Crysis on it, no problem. Because the machines they had on their own back end were very powerful. All you had to do was stream it. Really, the only weak link was internet access. And in 2009, you would need a pretty strong internet connection to stream it without latency. Uh-oh. That's certainly one problem with it. There were more problems. Herein lies the problem with hype. You know, you can get yourself worked into a frenzy. You can have the whole damn industry behind you. You can have passion, you can have talent. You can never, ever, ever truly be invincible. What seems like a genius level disruption of the industry that just hadn't been done yet because no one had thought of it might turn out to be something that no one had done because it just doesn't make sense from like a business standpoint or a practical standpoint. Oh, Steve. Underneath all of this, underneath the foundations of this brand new company, Perlman and others around him were ignoring a few seemingly minor, but in actuality completely fucking fatal issues. And that's kind of the real tragic aspect of this, is that the manic energy and brilliance that led Steve Perlman to success in his career also gave him a decent fucking amount of hubris. It also led people to believe that he was infallible. And before I get more into Steve Perlman's like personal issues and how they caused problems for this whole endeavor, I'm gonna run through some other issues which snuck up on him as well. The subscription numbers seem strong, but while it might seem logical to conclude from that number of 100,000 people applying for the closed beta of OnLive that, you know, a lot of these people are going to be prospective buyers, there are few reasons why that actually was not the case. You see, OnLive would later on claim that
1.5 million people
had subscribed to the service and could be considered like active members. They lied when they said that. The peak turned out to be 1,600 users. 1,600 users? I have more than half of that. And I'm just saying shit, man. You can't play Crysis on me. That 2.5 million number came from people who made free accounts because you could download OnLive on just like your computer, so you didn't even need the little device. People would do this thing where they could try a time-limited demo of any game on the service, and those were all counted. Brother, none of those were like in any way contributing to profits. If anything, they were taking away from them, and then they have like no reason to actually pay for the service because they would just do that just to like play the game, and then because they already owned like a 360 or a Wii or
PS Triple,
they would just buy it there because maybe their internet isn't fast enough to stream games perfectly. Here's another problem. The console itself. Oh boy. You know, it costs a lot of money to manufacture devices. You need to set up an entire fucking supply chain for it. You need to distribute it to stores by making deals with those stores. You need a strong enough financial base behind the entire venture to weather fiscal storms. I get why Perlman decided to shape OnLive in this way because it's what he was familiar with. I mean, after all, that's how web TV worked, and that was an undeniable success. But this was a different situation, and maybe it didn't make any sense to have like a little brick device that you pay for at all. Consoles themselves, and I'm talking pretty much every console, not the service, the actual physical devices are typically manufactured at a loss. What this means is that the company makes these things, they pay for the labor, they pay for the materials, they pay for the factories that make these things, and that all costs them more money per console than the consumer will pay for at the actual store. Why this is because it gives people an avenue into paying them for things that actually do make make them money. For instance, licensing fees console-owning companies get from companies that make games on their consoles. That, as well as like subscription services. All this is to say, since the physical consoles themselves are essentially a necessity that, again, these companies take a financial loss to get into the hands of consumers so that they can then start buying games and paying for services that actually are the money makers rather than the consoles themselves, that if OnLive was making these things, somewhere in the business plan, this was also seen as a necessity and not just a complete waste of time and energy and resources that doesn't in any way gel with the entire fucking pitch of the service as being this freeform thing that you can just play on anything. Right? Right? And yeah, you might say, oh, but you need some kind of OnLive brick physical device that you can buy, because what if you only have a display? Then it would make sense to have a little brick device you could plug into that display that you could then connect to your internet so you can already start playing OnLive without downloading anything. To that I'd say, yeah, I guess if you were sitting there with an internet connection good enough to support game streaming, but no devices that are already using that internet for anything that you can then download OnLive from onto like your computer or whatever, yeah, I guess you could buy an OnLive brick. I would counter though that does not happen. That makes no fucking sense. This doesn't even take into account Steve Perlman's personal failures, which are egregious and many. So firstly, and I guess kudos to him before I get further, one problem he did comprehend was that on the OnLive server side of things, it would be difficult to scale the devices. Like, you needed a console on the OnLive side of things for every single little brick device, and so they're still gonna have to like pay for that. Yes, I'm giving kudos to him just for recognizing that such a problem exists, not for fixing it. And in fact, graphics card manufacturer Nvidia was also aware of this. They offered Steve Perlman possible solutions, and he just declined to negotiate. I assume he didn't want to relinquish any part of the process to Nvidia. And furthermore, okay, actually, a little bit of context first, and this is all from this Verge article that it's fucking insane. There was another game streaming company. I mentioned it earlier. It was called Gaikai. Gaikai actually had a smaller scope and ambition. They didn't try to disrupt the entire industry. They were just operating with the goal that, like, here's an auxiliary little thing that other companies might use. It was not run by Steve Perlman, so it actually made money. The reason why was that there was no console manufacturing process that they had. They only had the service where you could just like make an account and stream it on your computer or whatever. They were focused on like game demos, so you'd still have to buy the game on like a console rather than trying to also supplant the consoles themselves. So it was just a way smarter, like more reasonable way to approach the whole thing. The thing is, it was also revealed to the world at the same 2009 GDC event that OnLive was. During GDC 2009, Gaikai and OnLive, they were both there. The CEO of Gaikai, a guy named David Perry, came over to OnLive to the booth to be like, hey man, you know, congrats. Oh, handshake, you seem cool. We're both doing this. Do you want to hang out or something? And Steve Perlman did not take that lying down. He started screaming at David Perry right there in the conference hall. And then at the E3 the next year in 2010, Gaikai announced that they, in addition to OnLive having rights to them, also had rights to Electronic Arts games. Steve Perlman was so angry at that E3 event that employees had to slam the conference room shut. With Perlman still inside, he was just screaming in there. They had to crank the music up so people wouldn't hear him. Perlman told EA he wanted exclusive rights to EA games. EA obviously said, dude, no. And then Perlman, in a rage, removed all of EA games from OnLive at the last minute. Just fucked himself for like no reason, just to be mad. Like, what are you doing? Like, people work for you. Like, what are you doing, man? COO Mike McGarvey was obviously against this move because he wasn't fucking stupid, and Steve Perlman, in retaliation, sidelined him in the company. Moving forward, Steve Perlman, I guess out of sheer bitterness, wouldn't allow OnLive to have any games on its service that Gaikai got first. Gaikai, meanwhile, kept doing its own thing, you know, like how a business does. Ubisoft was also driven off of OnLive when Perlman demanded that they drop all demos from the Gaikai service or OnLive would stop doing business with them. Valve was also driven off, so was Bethesda. He's burning bridges left and right, man. From the Verge article. While OnLive was struggling to attract and retain game content abroad, though, employees told us Perlman was also beginning to alienate his staff at home. Steve Perlman has a fairly well-documented reputation for not getting along with others, and as the majority shareholder at OnLive, he didn't have to answer to a soul. One manager told us that he outvoted the board of directors on occasion. Several employees mentioned that Perlman also kept cabinets full of special double-wall glass mugs and expensive tea exclusively for his use, and personal assistants whose job it was to keep them full, citing this as a sign that Perlman felt he was above his employees in some regard. I would agree. According to a staffer, Perlman would obsessively micromanage everything as the business continued to fail. Quote, Steve had that talent, but he never empowered anybody. He would tell people they were stupid in front of the entire office. Fuck off, Steve. Instead of trying to get new users because they had none. Perlman, quote, focused the company's time and resources on developing new products and features in the attempt to attract additional investment. Sometimes on extremely short notice, Perlman waited until mid-December to tell employees that they'd have to work over Christmas vacation. Fuck off, Steve. And also, not only did they have to work over Christmas once, they had to do it again the next year. Meanwhile, Perlman would from time to time call in from his fucking cabin in Lake Tahoe. Okay, I feel like at the beginning of this, I was pretty nice to him, and I just hate him now. He's the worst. What the fuck, Steve? You had it all, you bitch! And yeah, in that same December that people had to work over Christmas for the second Christmas in a row, a hiring freeze was put into effect. The firm was failing. No shit. But Perlman kept, for whatever reason, denying outside offers to buy the company off him from prospective buyers, including Adobe, Dell, and Sony. He had so many ways out of this. He could have sold it, and then they'd be fine because they wouldn't be run by Steve fucking Perlman. Actually, the next June, so June 2012, Hewlett-Packard, or HP, started off negotiations by giving Steve Perlman a $10K check, and then, quote, offered him $15 million for an exclusive 60-day window to make a deal. And OnLive, by the way, at the beginning, when everyone was still hyped, it was valued at over $1 billion. Good God. Anyway, employees started thinking, thank fucking God, maybe HP is gonna save us. According to HP, clients were even lined up for the idea, and the hype was still somehow strong enough to warrant continued operations, just under new management. If only. Not soon after, HP, I guess, realized that what they were getting themselves into just wasn't worth it, and they called the deal off. Steve Perlman and other executives, however, told nobody. They told no one that the deal was doomed. They actually persisted in this complete lie that things would be okay, just so that employees would keep working there for a couple more months, unaware that their livelihoods weren't just at risk, but were about to be straight up torpedoed into oblivion by the incoming absolute collapse of OnLive as a business. It's just too late. It's one thing to be a big old ideas guy, even to be actually smart enough to figure out revolutionary ideas. Like, Perlman did do that. It's another thing entirely to have an entire company's worth of people entrust their financial livelihoods to you and to just go just dog shit stupid with it. Like, that's people's lives. I really wonder if Steve Perlman wouldn't have been better off being some kind of, like, you know, engineer, mad scientist type in the back of whatever company he's working for, rather than giving him even a bit of power like that. Yes, he co-founded Web TV, but he was not like the main owner of the company. That's probably why they succeeded. With all that in mind, I'm sure you saw this next part coming a mile away. On August 17th, 2012, Steve Perlman called an all-hands meeting. Oh man, this part's sad. people came into this so excited to the point they clapped when he showed up and started talking because they thought he was about to announce that HP did in fact buy them or some other company bought them and everything would be okay. They still, to that point, thought that his genius would save them all. Instead, he thanked them for their time and just fired everybody. Like, everybody was laid off without severance. Furthermore, a lot of employees bought stocks in the company because they thought, understandably, that it was gonna like increase in value over time, and those were all now worthless. And they no longer had any health insurance either. He also said it was all his fault. Aw, I mean, it is. But you saying that means fuck all, Steve. He said, I'm the one that brought you here. I'm the one that ultimately made decisions, and I'm the one that ultimately takes responsibility. So I am sorry, and it didn't end up exactly as we'd hoped. Sorry doesn't cut it, dude. Now, Steve Perlman felt a little bad, just a little. And so he decided to donate $50,000 of his own money to the health insurance of like all of his employees. That's not a lot. That's a pretty fucking small amount. Especially in a country where healthcare costs frequently balloon to over $100,000 depending on severity of illness. And he had a lot of employees that were laid off. $50,000 is barely dick. The company he sold it to was called Lauder Partners. So I guess the question remains, what did Lauder Partners decide to do with OnLive, the company, after they had bought it for a paltry $4 million? Well, surprisingly, they kept it going. They did, to their credit, hire back some of those workers, but not all of them. And what happened to Gaikai? Well, Gaikai was bought by Sony for $380 million. $380 million. Sony then integrated Gaikai into their own streaming service, PlayStation Now. OnLive just kind of kept chugging along, a shadow of its potential. And finally, in 2015, Sony also bought OnLive from Lauder Partners, and it scrapped it for parts. It put it down. Like a sick dog. It integrated those workers into Sony itself, I believe, like based on everything I've read, which is, hey, at least they have their fucking jobs. So I guess, yeah, the silver lining there for those employees that somehow managed to hold on through all of that, we're now working for Sony, a company which had nothing to do with Steve Perlman. But you know what does have to do with Steve Perlman? Steve Perlman, and he kept on chugging. His story doesn't end with OnLive at all. A testament to how when you decide to just cut your losses and just not care about the people who you've negatively affected, yeah, you can make out of it with like a decent amount of your money still left. Enough, in fact, actually to invest into a new venture. By 2014, he started a new company called Artemis Networks. The pitch with that one is that they could transmit internet at much higher speeds. It would eliminate dropped calls and dead zones and go through solid objects that would block other cellular signals. And it doesn't need cell towers. And yeah, I mean, if all that works, that would be pretty crazy. That would also be an upending of market expectations, but it would also apparently be an upending of like science. Like there's a lot of words explaining why all of that is just very unlikely, but Perlman was quoted as saying, everyone we called, like professors and PhD students were like, you're crazy. This'll never work. We all know that wireless doesn't work that way. We had another person to whom I said, look, everyone's been telling me this can't possibly work. I just need to know why. He then hired a researcher to disprove that it would work. And shockingly, the researcher actually couldn't disprove it. So make of that what you will, but we also haven't had, in the years since then, a massive overhaul of wireless networks. So make of that what you will too. Oh, and actually, in fact, another quote from him. He said, I am confident that Dido, that's like the whole process by which all the other stuff he said could happen, is going to revolutionize communications as I've ever been confident in anything I've ever designed in my career. That doesn't mean I'm right, but for example, I was far less confident than OnLive was going to work, and here we are. And so when was this article written? June 2011. So while all that other stuff was going on, while he refused to let go of OnLive and let anyone else steward it and maybe guide it towards a more desirable outcome, his eyes were he was over OnLive. He didn't really care. He didn't care. What he cared about instead was Artemis Networks. Here we are indeed, Steve. If you didn't have confidence in OnLive, why didn't you give it to another company, Steve? Look, man, he's like, he doesn't give a fuck. Like, he doesn't care at all. And he just moves on. And he's like, oh, actually, this thing is gonna really work. He doesn't fucking care. Like, there's no, like, be a person, Steve. Like, what's up with you, man? I don't know how to end this fucking video. Like, it's, Artemis Networks is apparently still going strong, and the idea might even hold water, even though it's been a few years and no one's heard anything more about it. I don't know. Steve Perlman, I don't know.